Welcome back to another exhilarating episode of Let Me Show You How Something Works. So, I'm going to walk through importing an entire set of data for into the wiring database. This was, you know, junk data that was generated just to simulate um, another spreadsheet. But for the most part, I'll go through steps A through Z, how you can set this up to import into the database itself, and then it'll show you how to tailor all the custom fields and all the endpoints and etc. and how that works. So right now I have a spreadsheet with roughly 300,000 rows. Right now there's a hard limit of a 50 megabit file on here. And as you can see, I defaulted the whole wiring database, so it pretty much starts out as blank. So there's nothing here except for everything that would come up normally on a fresh install. So what we need to do is go through each column and make sure that there's a spot for this column inside the database. To make it easier, any column that is, just to show you how this works via a test data, any column that doesn't start with CF is already in there. So these would be the custom fields that we want to add. Everything else is already in this particular database. And if you wanted to see, what your database spreadsheet would look like, that you would need to fill out, if you went up to import export, you can actually download an import template. So whenever you get to the point where you think you're satisfied with everything you have in here, you come back to here, you download an import template, and that will give you every column that you need to fill in. So pretty much the goal is just to get everything set up the way you want it, and then from there, download, copy and paste your stuff into there. Or what I'll show you how to do is take this spreadsheet, once we have all the columns built out, I'll show you how to build a mapping. So you can basically take this column, or the spreadsheet's columns, map it to the wiring database, and basically you tell the system which columns get imported into which fields. So let me start with that. Then again, it might be quiet while I'm doing it because I'm going to go from A to Z, and we'll see how it works. And if you have any suggestions on how to improve it, or any questions, feel free to let me know and I'll go over them. But let's start with getting these columns built and make sure we have everything we need here. So right now we can actually see there's no custom fields in here. So this is going to be what we want to add. So if we look over at the columns, we're going to have two sets of data we're going to have to put in. Our circuit type identifiers, and then the custom fields. So right now we don't have any circuit identifiers. What we need to do is make sure that every specific identifier here is built into the database, otherwise it's going to refuse to import that row. This kind of helps protect it from getting faulty data or just incorrect stuff and whatnot. So let's start with that. Forgot to mention too, once the data does get exported, it prepends it with CF for custom field. You don't need to put that here. Just the whatever the field name that you want. Because if you go to look at your custom fields file, um, this will give you all of those there. Like I said before, keep in mind you can rearrange these if you don't like the order, and then you can always add to them. There's also 3 reserved custom fields that'll end up getting re-imported if you accidentally delete them. These are for keeping track of who, what, and when somebody does a bulk upload. It just makes it easier to track when you import data if you wanted to search something or go back and look at something. You've got that. Make sure the different kind of endpoints that you have on here are filled in. I pretty much put in as many as I thought would be useful. You can always add or remove them to suit your needs. This section comes into play when you go to create a circuit and you build your endpoints out. So you say, hey, the thing I'm plugged into is a device port, patch panel, or whatnot, and then same thing on the Z side. The next thing would be, make sure all your circuit identifiers are in here. So back to what I was saying is, once you get this to where you're comfortable, and you go down to the import export wiring data, you'll have the three buttons in order. So if you went to download an import template, after you set it up, it'll give you a spreadsheet that looks similar to this with all the required rows that you need. So if you build it the way you want and you just want to copy and paste your data in, you can. If not, what you're going to have to do is set up a mapping, kind of like I'm going to show you next. And that'll take like a Excel sheet or a CSV file that doesn't look like this, and you just map your columns to where you want your data to go. So let me show you how to do that real quick. What we'll do is we'll go to create and edit an import profile, and we're going to call whatever our profile is, whatever we want to name it. If you do strict mode means every column needs data. If not, it's going to fail the import, which means every column has to be lined up with another column. So we'll leave this off because that should be good enough for right now. And then we will create a new one. And you can even put some notes in about what you want. All right. If you want to save it, you can save it and work on it later. So the next thing we want to do is bring our CSV file over and then click on load headers. And you'll see now the left side has all of the columns from your sheet. The right side is everything that is in the current database. So you have a couple options in how you want to move things. First thing I want to do is toggle this off again and save it. Change that strict mode. We're going to save that. So you have a couple options. You can either, if you're not going to use a column, you can just drag it to the bottom and get rid of it, or you can just go down and exit out. So get rid of a spacer, for example. Or you can drag and drop. This does add spacers when there's extra data. You can also go down here. You can view any history from every time one of these was saved. This will give you the before and the after of what it looks like once you've changed your something around, or you wanted to kind of compare and contrast before you restored it. And then you can restore it if you want. I can restore this back to when I first created it. So the next thing I want to do real quick is go through and kind of make sure all of these columns align. So if you also look, you can move each side individually, but if you look up here, there's a from and a to. So if I, for instance, want to move 51 to say 20 spot, you can do that. And then again, you can also restore it if you'd like. So if we look here at 20, it was a spacer, and now it requires dispatch. Alright, So I'm going to go through real quick and just make sure all of these are where they should be. So, cut to me being done. I didn't think you wanted to sit through and watch me add a billion more columns. But for the most part, I'd add a few more. And now if we were to go back to the edit import profile, this is kind of what we're left with right now. So each of these match where I want the data to go. And what's nice is once this is built, you can leave it and use it for later. And you can create multiple profiles for however you want to import different types of CSV file. Once you save it, all the extra columns that aren't in use are going to be shown up on the bottom right. And again, you can see all the differences in history that have been done. So if you ever need to restore or view an old snapshot, you can. So this is already saved, so the next thing we do is we want to drag our file over. Now that everything's set up, what I'd probably recommend is go in, and if you go to the wiring database main page and then you go back to manage wireless or manage wiring database configurations, you can download the config, which is basically all the information that you just configured this wiring database for. You'll get a JSON file that you can store that looks something like this. So if you ever have to zero out the database or something happens and you don't want to restore everything, this will bring the database back up to the configured point that you have it set up. So you'll have all of your custom stuff built in. So this will all restore your custom fields, your endpoints, circuit identifiers, anything like that. So now let's say I want to go back, and the next thing I end up doing is I want to import all of that data now. So if I go into import and export and back up to bulk import, you have two options here. The first one is a dry run, which will show you what the server is going to do with the data. The next one is if you take it off, it's going to go ahead and insert it into the database for you. And then you'll go down and pick your import profile and then take off dry run, because we know that should work, and you can run it. That's going to give you a new job, and it's going to import all the rows that we have in that CSV. So it looks like it's about 141,000 rows. And then down below, this will give you all of the data that it's done. So it tells you that it's created this circuit ID. And if we close out of this, this is going to run in the background until it's finished. But if we ever want to look at it again, you can just go right back to bulk import. And then you can see the status on this job. So if I were to refresh the wireless page or wiring page, you can see everything here. And then we can double check what's in here. And then again, history will show you everything that's been done to this particular entry. Right now it's just creating, so it's showing you that there was nothing here before. And then here's all the information that it imported. I'm just going to grab one of these. So let's see. I'm just going to look for A-side building circuits. I don't know how many there are. Like I said, it's just generated data. But if I go over to my search reference and I look for building, and let's see. I don't think that's a custom field. So I should just be able to put it in here. So endpoint building. And then that'll give you everything that's in building A for the endpoint. You can also search anything you want. Otherwise, if something gets put in here, it's going to try and narrow it down a little bit for you. And then that should be it for that one.